Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast of SR Cardinals Talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals. With me is my co-host, Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site. And we're in episode 543 with the start of OTAs. And so we're Cardinals in the final stretch of the offseason program. And this is where we are currently at, Seth. We have 3 weeks of OTAs, 1 week of minicamp, and then we will hit the absolute dead part of the offseason. And just a programming note, because of what it is in the year, this will be our only episode this week, and we will be off next week. And we'll do one show this week, one show recording on June the 4th in 2 weeks. So we're probably looking at every 2 weeks until basically after minicamp, and then you might not hear much of Seth because I'll be doing shows with the opposing team that's getting that time of the year. There's not a lot to talk about, right, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, and the things that we know, whether it's you attending OTA stuff, our buddy Johnny from PHNX Cardinals, or Howard Balzer with you, we know what's happening. We just are not.
We can't. We have to talk around things because now Seth, technically, if he hears something from someone, he could say it. But yeah, those of us credentialed to attend practices, one of the things that Cardinals do not permit is reporting of, even at this part of the season, who is running with which team, which position. So that was all speculatory type things. And so, yeah.
And it was interesting, and I know we're going to talk about it, but it's interesting that they made such an announcement with the left tackle position, because it just seemed like it was going to be the case all along.
Yeah.
But we've watched Jonathan Gannon kind of be sly about that stuff before. So
I don't know what it was, but like he was like, hey, yeah. Because people asked him about it at the press conference on Monday, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about one of the things we're talking about in this show is the decision to move Paris Johnson to left tackle and to keep Jonah Williams on right tackle where he played last year. And we're going to talk a little bit about participation as well, of kind of there. But Jonathan Gannon it was like he just threw a bone, threw the media members a bone, and then said, and I reserve the right, obviously, to change it, but maybe because they were already doing it and he liked how things looked so far, he just decided to throw the media bone. Because if everyone recalls, at the start of the offseason, basically right after free agency began, Jonathan Gannon was asked about Paris Johnson and Jonah Williams, and he said, let me put this out here. Starting jobs and positions, we'll know those the Friday before week one. And we're like, really? And yeah, so the news is that the Cardinals have announced Paris Johnson has moved to left tackle. Jonah Williams signed in the offseason to replace DJ Humphries, will play right tackle. And that was what we all guessed would happen, right? That I figured that would probably be the case. And isn't that what you expected to happen as well, Seth?
Yeah, it was one of those situations where, the sources had told us that was their plan from the jump, that Jonah was signed to be the right tackle, blah, blah, blah. But it's also one of those things that's like, until it comes to fruition, and it's still not a done deal, let's be honest.
No, not technically.
PJ can look awful, and they're like, yeah, let's get this back the other way. God forbid an injury happens type situation. So there's a lot of things that can come to pass before that's locked in. But, we had heard from the jump that was kind of what they wanted to do. Just like we said, more than anything, surprised that they were just going to give us the information that quickly.
Yeah, and it really makes sense. I mean, you drafted Paris Johnson 6th overall a year ago with the rare exception of Elaine Johnson. When you draft someone that high, you draft a tackle to be a left tackle. And in fairness, Paris Johnson, the way he's built, his athletic profile, everything about him says left tackle. The only reason why he didn't play left tackle last year is because they had a tackle. They had DJ Humphries there. And it always felt like Paris was going to move over to the left side at some point. But it's nice to hear now that we know it, the Froholt talked about it, how he is working the part. He's looking good on that left side. And we knew, the biggest question about Paris Johnson, honestly, wasn't his ability as a left tackle. It was whether he'd be able to play the right side, right? That's what we talked about last year. We felt it would be fine because he had played right guard, so it's different than having played left guard, left tackle, never played the right side at all. He had a season he started at right guard. He had a season he played at left tackle, and so you knew that he had the mechanics to both sides. But the main question was he going to play left guard or right tackle? And he did a very fine job at right tackle last season.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations that you look at, and it's interesting because, yes, I agree. Most of the time you're drafting a tackle in the top 10. Those are guys that are left tackles. But we have seen in the last 5 or 6 years, obviously Tristan Wirfs, he moved over to the left side finally last year, but was an all-pro right tackle after being drafted in the first round. Jack Conklin, I know he was in 2018, but same thing, two-time all-pro right tackle, drafted 8th overall, so right around where PJ was drafted. So it's like one of those situations that, people want he's the left tackle. They drafted him for that, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, and obviously
both tackle positions anymore are almost equally important.
Well, and, let's be honest, he has to earn it on top of that. But, if Paris Johnson turned into an all-pro right tackle, I don't think anybody was going to be like, I can't believe they drafted this guy 6th overall, right?
Right.
Like, people would be like, oh, they got an all-pro left tackle or all-pro tackle. That's awesome. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those situations that it makes sense. Just the way that the team has been built, Jonah, had not played overly well at the left tackle position after, I think he had one really good year, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, he did.
And then after that, it's been, up and down. And so for him to end up, getting that right tackle spot coming off of, which was a pretty good year for him at right tackle in his first year in that system.
Here's the thing about Jonah Williams. He has a season of right tackle, and the what is it? The next gen stats. There was a thing on next gen stats. It's like everything about his play at right tackle analytically was an improvement in pass protection over his play at left tackle.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you're looking at with this whole thing, and you're hoping that it is something that continues on that trend, and that they're able just to get a little bit more out of him and continue to be a really solid, NFL player. So we'll see how that, ends up. You look at it like last year, you're talking about it. I know this sounds like a lot, but 8 sacks in 17 games. Again, I know that sounds like a lot, but it was the least of his career since his rookie season that was cut short by an injury. So, in his second season, he gave up 10. In his third season, he gave up 13. So the only give up 8 was good, and to see that improvement, and now, like you said, and that again, first year playing the position, now you get to see him in his second year. I know it's a new system, but Petzing's offense is a little more friendly in terms of what they ask the linemen to do, so it should be a nice fit. And so getting PJ over there, and getting him kind of locked in. I mean, I know
Well, it's also there's another factor of moving to the left side, is that in a locker room, the starting left tackle carries a level of cachet in terms of respect.
right.
And DJ had it in part because he'd done it for so long, but he was the guy. He was the guy on that offensive line that everyone looked to. And Paris doesn't necessarily, like in year two, is not necessarily that guy, but Yelda Froholt talked about how Paris is starting to fill kind of that role as if you're the left tackle, you are the blindside protector, and therefore are usually considered to be like the best in the line. Doesn't always happen, but he's going into that. It's been interesting to hear, like, he's so ridiculously long, he's so smooth, and then Hilda says it's ridiculous how strong he is for how long he is. And so, like, obviously, this is the time of the off season when all you hear is positivity.
Right, exactly. But the biggest thing is, and it's so early in this whole thing, but the biggest thing is that you want to get him on the track to getting that second contract, and the faster that happens, in the sense of, like, he is, one of the better left tackles in the NFL. And I know people will say, well, he hasn't even played a snap yet. No, I agree, but that's why you want to get him there, because if you're going to see this, and he's going to be, obviously the first draft pick of this regime, like you said, playing a cornerstone franchise position, and the ability to get him as many snaps as possible before that extension time comes up in 2 years. And I know people are saying, well, they don't have to make the decision that soon, but let's be honest, if he's worth it in 2 years, they'll make that decision and they'll extend him. I mean, that's what the goal is. And so that's where we're at now, hoping that, and like I said, if they would have kept him at right tackle, the only thing we would be hoping is that he turned into an all-pro right tackle.
Exactly.
So then you're justifying that. But, now you're talking about the guy that,
isn't that funny about, like, the position? So if he's playing left tackle, he's drafted top 10. It's almost that, unless you're doing the comparison game, if you're saying, did they make a mistake in drafting PJ, or should they have got Will Anderson?
right.
But if Paris Johnson as a left tackle is an above average left tackle, maybe an every once in a while Pro Bowl, which is hard to do, because left tackles, once you hit Pro Bowl status, you stay there because of reputation. But if he is a sometimes Pro Bowls, like say on DJ Humphrey's level, and he was drafted number 6 overall, by the end of his tenure, no one will have said, oh, we should have drafted him. But
and
when he's top 10 and he plays right tackle, you hope he's an all pro.
Right. And you look at it, and a perfect example of that's Ronnie Stanley. Obviously, injuries aside, Stanley was looked at as one of the best, left tackles in the NFL. Injuries beset him over the last 4 seasons, and that's a different conversation. But, if his first 4 years, talking about Paris Johnson, are the equivalent of Ronnie Stanley's, we're talking about what, a home run pick, right?
Yeah,
we're talking about,
absolutely.
And obviously, injuries aside, if that's what he gets you, you're ecstatic, and that's such a big thing. But on the flip side, if he ends up being, like you said, a throwback name that some people may or may not remember, but Anthony Costanzo, remember, with the Indianapolis Colts, played forever. I think he was a couple-time Pro Bowler, but I mean, this dude started 150 games in his career. The perfect example that I always go back to is DeBrickashaw Ferguson. DeBrickashaw Ferguson with the New York Jets. I think he made 3 Pro Bowls in his career. 3. That dude started 160 games in 10 years. So
And you wouldn't feel bad about that pick at all.
Right. Every game possible he started. He was never the best guy, but he was always really freaking good. And that is a huge thing. And so that's what you look at with Paris. And I think you said it perfect, Jess. Like, if you get DeBrickashaw Ferguson, you're like, great pick. If you end up with Ronnie Stanley and a longer, his great is a longer period than Ronnie Stanley's, you're like, that's great. Obviously if
you get Trent Williams,
right, you end up with Trent Williams or Laramie Tunsil or one of those freaks that, but like you said, there's a reason that all pros and Pro Bowls are so hard to make. And that's because those guys are making them every year.
And they stay there forever. Trent Williams, there's no, as long as he is playing, he's gonna be the all pro at left tackle, because he just, and honestly, and part of that is media voting, because unless he becomes atrocious, when you vote, there aren't a lot of metrics you can look at on offensive line as a media member. Someone who votes for the Pro Football Writers Association, the all NFL teams. That's kind of like the idea of the AP. You've got 50 AP writers who get votes. And those guys vote on offensive linemen, and that is simply reputation, because
they have no idea.
With receivers, you can look at their season, and you can have different all pro receivers different years, because Cooper Kupp had his magical year, or Jamar Chase. If DeAndre Hopkins isn't an all-pro, you don't feel bad, but Trent Williams, he's the guy. He just still is. It's just how that goes. Right. The other part about OTAs that I want to talk about before we start going into the position battles that we want to run down on each side of the ball is the comment about participation. Interestingly enough, the two players that Yelda Froholt, their starting center, or as of right now starting center, mentioned is who is in the building, include Budda Baker and James Conner, who are both in the last year of his contracts, which would be almost without fail, would be a quiet, it's not really quiet. But the voluntary part of the offseason, they're not going to be there.
No.
And culturally, and I will give you this caveat. There is a reason why Budda Baker is in the offseason program, is because when they redid his contract, they put $400,000 into the workout bonus, which means Budda's going to be into the offseason program. The same thing with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's got $1 million tied up in the workout program, and that's not to say that
he wouldn't
be there. It's just that they want him there. And so when they gave him that new contract, that's one of the big things they did, is they negotiated, hey, we want you the quarterbacks here. And so for whatever reason, he didn't do it before, but now he does it. He's there in the building. But so there's a big reason why Budda Baker's there. He's not holding out. He's not missing the voluntary part of the offseason, because monetarily it would hurt him. It's $400,000 tied into attending the offseason program. And the Cardinals, Steve Keim was not a workout bonus guy. He was not. But if there's one thing we've noticed about Monty Ossenfort in year 1 and year 2, almost every new player that they've signed, they all have workout bonuses for this year. Why? Because it's their first year in the system. And so while it is voluntary, they really want those guys in the building, and so we will reward you for that. So if we will pay you this workout bonus to do it. But every single one of their new contracts that they gave out included a workout bonus. Of anyone who was LJ Collier didn't get it, the re-signing people didn't get it, except for Keith Ismail. That's because he wasn't with the team last offseason. So for any player that they signed, it was their first offseason, they included on a workout bonus, which I think is really smart.
Well, and I wonder how much that's Monty, and again, I think that's exactly what you said, smart, and how much of that's Jonathan Gannon, hey, I want these guys here. We need to incentivize them to be here to because you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, and especially with DJ Humphries, but there's not a whole lot of coaching that's going on in these things. That's the NFLPA has stepped in and said, hey, we're not doing too much. Remember, when too much happens, it ends up in the news, right?
Yeah.
So there's not like a whole lot of like stuff that's actually happening.
They're doing really, really basic technique things.
But what is happening is and you said it from the beginning, you're building a culture. And this has been something that, whether it was under Kingsbury or the end of the Arians era, the culture has been missing. And I can't remember who it was. And I'd love I should have sent you the quote, but I didn't. But a new head coach this year, so, that narrows it down to someone, basically said, like, I don't set the culture, the players set the culture. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen that. That doesn't work. Like, unless you have a psychopath at the top, like a Tom Brady, that's just obsessed with winning, the players set the culture based on the expectations, within the organization.
Like that. Arian said something like that about, like, when it came to accountability, it
Yeah.
was the leaders in the locker room. But Gannon believed that Gannon is very about coach first. Like,
well, and so to your point, like, why was that Cardinals team so good, and why did so many young players struggle to find a niche and a role in that team? Because when you're talking about culture, and this is old man Seth and Jess having a conversation now, but at my work, at your work, you and I have had this conversation off the air 100 times. We are very responsible. We've been doing our jobs for a long time. We also understand that we have responsibility away from work that causes us to take everything that's happening at work incredibly responsible, because we don't want to be the reason our kids miss a meal or our
right.
kid, things like that. So everything we do is with this air of responsibility around us. In football or professional sports, younger people that are for the first time getting freedom from the college lifestyle, where they're
very regimented.
Yeah, and before NIL, we're not getting paid, or at least not getting paid above
we didn't know about it.
Right. But those guys, they get that taste of freedom, and they're a little out of control, and it's understandable. That's just life. And so you go back to Arians and you say, why did that work? Well, because you had Carson Palmer, because you had Larry Fitzgerald, you had Calais Campbell, you had older guys in there, and it still didn't work to perfection. I mean, we talk about Darrell Washington all the time. Fast forward to Cliff Kingsbury, it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because you just lacked the veterans that were needed to make it work.
And Cliff wouldn't call guys out.
Right. And so
Gannon establishes very early that there is a level of behavior that is expected. He holds himself to that. He holds his coaches to that. And he holds everyone in the locker room to it. Like, the perfect example is Zaven Collins when he showed up finishing his breakfast. And Gannon said, yo, you eat that before you get here. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's kind of establishing these are the norms. And once you establish them with your team leaders, they buy in, and then they enforce it.
Right. And, and I know it was kind of tongue in cheek and in jest and all that stuff, but think about what he said to Danny Druin, right, the other day.
That's not winning behavior. Donnie Druin, our buddy from SI.com, he brought donuts for the media members. And if you, when I was talking about that, Gannon said, that's not winning behavior. We had fun with that with Donnie, but that's hilarious. But it's kind of establishing, hey, you eat right.
Right. You take care of yourself. You take accountability for what you're putting in your body, so that way it doesn't break down and let you down. And I can tell you this, like, I'm my son, my middle son is going to go to Queen Creek High School, and right now at Queen Creek High School they have probably the best 2026 athlete in the state of Arizona. He's already got a full ride to ASU for baseball. He has over 20 D1 offers for football. And you talk about it and like that type of stuff, that's where his mentality is all the time. It's like what I put in my body matters. Being they won a state championship in baseball on a Tuesday night. He was literally in the gym Wednesday, like working out, like for football. Like that's setting the standard, and what that does is the younger guys see that and they go, that's like if literally the best baseball player in this or the best athlete in the state of Arizona is doing that, like I'm not that guy, so I better be there.
Exactly.
and that's how you build a culture. And to your point, that's what Jonathan Gann is trying to do.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Sierra podcast, special Cardinals Talk on the Web, we're going to talk about position battles. So we're now at the off-season program. They're going one-on-ones. What are the position battles we're looking at on the offensive side of the ball? That's coming next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best of our Cardinals Talk on the Web. Offensive position battles. We're going to go position by position. What are the areas where we are looking at? And some are going to be minor, some are going to be major. So at quarterback, there's no question who's the starter. And honestly, there's not much of a question as who's the backup. There is a minor position battle between Clayton Tune and Desmond Ridder, but I'm going to assume that it's going to take an upset for Clayton Tune to unseat Desmond Ridder as the backup quarterback in 2024.
Yeah, it would be a huge upset. I mean, it would look, and you hope that it wouldn't matter, but it would look bad if Clayton Tune was the backup after you gave up something.
Yeah.
Obviously, Rondell Moore probably wasn't in the long-term plans of this franchise.
Rondell Moore was a cut candidate potentially this year.
Right.
And I liked the fact that they traded him because it was kind of the perfect scenario for Atlanta and for Arizona, because Desmond Ridder wasn't going to make the team, and Rondell Moore probably wasn't going to make the team. And so it was a perfect scenario for both of them.
Let's be honest. We didn't know how much Desmond Ridder wasn't going to make the team at the time of the trade.
Correct.
Nobody had any idea about that. But yeah, I mean, so it would be a upset if Clayton Tune made the team over Desmond Ridder. Doesn't mean that Clayton Tune can't be on the team, that they carry three quarterbacks, but it would be a huge upset if he was.
At running back, there's no question James Conner's the guy. What's going to be interesting is everything behind him. Who will be the primary backup? Who's going to be the third down back? And as we know, that position especially is one that can change during the season. You will see a guy emerge as the new backup, but I'm super intrigued with that position because Michael Carter didn't start the year with the team last year. Showed some promise. He had Amari DeMarcado do fine as an undrafted rookie. And then you bring in DJ Dallas. I'm interested to see what they see out of him. If he's like if that 3-year deal that he got was kind of around the idea like Dennis Gardeck, you get stud special teamer, maybe beyond that. But I think they expected him to be a little bit more than that. Maybe their return specialist. And then you add Trey Benson to the mix, their first third-round pick, a guy that shows a lot of promise, who has breakaway speed. So he's nearly the size of James Conner in terms of build, and he has the breakaway speed that Michael Carter has. And so it's going to be super intriguing for me over the course of all offseason is how the back of that, how everyone behind James Conner fills that room.
Well, I feel like, again, it's not a lock, but it's almost an injury, barring an injury lock, that it's going to be James Conner and Trey Benson on the final 53. From there, it gets really intriguing.
DJ Dallas will be there as well. So
right.
I'm 100% sure that DJ Dallas is a lock as well in some role.
So basically, it comes down to, and I think it's going to be an interesting battle. is it Michael Carter or is it Amari DiMercato? Like, and the thing that Amari now has working against him is that they don't need a backup. They need a specialist, right? So like last year, one of the things that made Amari so valuable was that he became basically like the number 2 running back. Um, and or he was like the number 3 coming out of camp, but he wasn't real like they didn't
And he didn't
have
have a set niche role. He was passing down back is what
right,
he.
right. So and now it's like, and he took over that role of kind of the backup runner, and so then they brought in Michael Carter, who was more of the passing down. So it'll just be interesting because I think Amari has earned 2 things. One, he's earned the opportunity to work to earn that role or stay in that role, but he's also earned the opportunity to, if he is just going to be the preseason bell cow, to get released and go find a place that fits.
Yeah.
The problem is, and this is something you and I talk about off the air all the time, but then we talk about on the air too, is like people get so infatuated with these undrafted free agent stories. And we love Amari DiMercato. Like we're not saying anything out of pocket, but he is literally a dime a dozen running back. Like
Yeah, he really is. And when a team makes off-season plans, they did not make any plan moving forward banking on what Amari DiMercato was going to do.
Right. And I think that's the best way to put it, Jess. I think that's like literally hitting the nail on the head of like, if Amari...
It was even like that about Benjamin. Like, we loved Benjamin. And I'm like, the Cardinals made no off-season plans banking on Benjamin. Anything Benjamin gives me, anything Amari DiMercato gives you is great, but they're not banking on it. You bank on James Conner. They drafted Trey Benson. They expect something out of Trey Benson. They're going to give him every opportunity. They signed DJ Dallas. They're paying him 3 years, $12 million, and everything this year is guaranteed. They're expecting things out of DJ Dallas.
But
they
like you said, also
expect anything out of DiMercato.
Right, but like you said also, Jess, and I thought it was, succinct, is that DJ Dallas has a very specific role that they're looking at, and anything above that role is gravy. Whereas, DiMercato and Michael Chandler, it's like you've got to earn your role. Like you said, Trey Benson, obviously James Conner, those guys. Benson's role is probably not set, but his ability to win the role is set. Let's put it that way. Like you said, they're going to give him every opportunity. So DiMercato and Chandler are the ones that have to figure out like, hey, where do I fit in and how do I get in?
The wide receiver position is interesting. We expect Marvin Harrison to be the number 1. However, that's not he doesn't have to be the X. He should be the X. But I think every one of now, there are more or less 5 spots, like roster spots that feel like locks. You've got Marv, you've got Zay Jones at this side, you've got Michael Wilson, you've got Greg Dortch, and based on guaranteed money, Chris Moore is probably a lock for the roster. And after that, it's just a matter of do they keep 5, do they keep 6 receivers? But what is uncertain is the exact role they will have. And that's going to be super intriguing because Marv should be the number 1. He should be the X. That doesn't mean he'll only play that X position. Zay Jones is a 3-position receiver. He can play all of them. Wilson has the ability to play both outside positions. Greg Dortch, we know what he can do in the slot. It's going to be super intriguing to see how that shakes out. For me, who's going to be your top 2? Okay, in base sets, is it going to be Marvin Jones? Marv and Jones? Is it going to be Harrison and Wilson? Is it going to is that how that's going to go? And then when you go 3, who's the wide receiver 3 and who's playing in the slot? Is it Michael Wilson coming in? Is Zay Jones going to play in the slot? Are they going to move Marv to the slot because of the potential matchups that you could the mismatches that you could create? Or is Dortch going to have that niche role as the slot guy? Is basically what he was last year. He was not only that, he was the backup slot guy to Rondell Moore. And then, or will Dortch end up being gadget guy? The roles of 1 through 4, I'm really, really intrigued in seeing how that plays out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because I think it feels like their goal right now is 1 and 2 to be Marvin Harrison and Michael Wilson. But I don't think that they're afraid if it's Zay Jones with Marvin, obviously. The biggest thing we've talked about with Wilson is his health. He's got to stay healthy. Obviously, Zay's the same way coming off the injury. We still don't have all his contract details yet, so we can't overly speculate on what the expectation level is for him, right? But I think with what they have, they want it to be Marvin and then Wilson. That is what's intriguing after that. Is it going to be Zay as 3 with Dortch being your 4th / kind of primary slot guy, but you'll go with Zay or Marvin as a big slot in specific scenarios, or is it just Dortch is the slot guy and Zay and Michael Wilson and will fight it out to see who gets those snaps. I think those are intriguing questions that need to be answered, and that's how I'm looking forward to it. But like you said, the top 5 seem like a lock. The only exception being depending on what Zay Jones's contract looks like, right? Like if it's 1.2 million and nothing guaranteed after that, and it's
which
like
we'll doubt based on the interest there was in him. I doubt that, but
and that's the hard part is agents, and I'm not saying it was an agent that fed the information to anybody, but agents like to exaggerate things at times, and so that'll be what's interesting for this is Zay was he really wanted by guys like Kansas City? Who was the other team he went and saw? Tennessee.
And then that there wasn't that much because they went inside Tyler Boyd. So
right, exactly.
What I think is going to be an identical contract to what Boyd get. I mean that Jones getting.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I think that's the only if in this scenario. But yeah, those top 5 seem like locks. And in this offense, that may be all they need, right?
Right. That brings us to tight end. We know it's Trey McBride. And we know Elijah Higgins is going to make the team, and we know that Tip Ryman's going to be in the team. They will keep 4 tight ends on the roster. So you've got 2 battles. One is you've got between Tip and Higgins, who's going to play more, and then who's going to be number 4 on that roster. Is it going to be Travis Vokalek? Is it going to be Bernhard Seikovits? Is it going to be Blake Whiteheart, the undrafted guy they liked last year, who ended up being number 4 on the roster late in the year? But McBride's a star. And then Higgins, what will be the role? What will be the role? Will Higgins continue to move forward and be that guy that we thought he was towards the end of last year?
You know what's interesting for me, Jess,
Yeah.
is that I wonder how much, and I know people are going to think I'm kind of crazy, I wonder how much the Jones signing could affect the Higgins playing time. Kind of that big slot, red zone type of guy. Like, could that play out that way? So that, like you said, it's really interesting to see how Elijah Higgins works out in there, because everything we've heard is how much they love him.
He
Uh,
well, and the fact that the interest that there was around him league wide when the Dolphins cut him, he had the most waiver claims put on him in the NFL out of all final cuts, final roster cut downs. There were 5 teams that put in waiver claims on Higgins because he has size, he's got the balls, and he's super athletic. He's super athletic. So it was like
which makes you think if there was something that they were thinking about in terms of moving on, that they would be able to get a day 3 pick after the way he performed last year, especially.
yeah. And so, the idea, we know Tip Ryman, unless he proves to struggle with the mental side of the that his role will be Jeff Swaim's role that last year, which is the primary blocking. So he will come in especially for rundown situations, and then beyond that, we'll wait and see. But can he be more than that? What will Higgins do, and who's going to be that number 4 behind him? Behind all those 3 guys is that. And on the offensive line, there's really one position that we're watching with potentially a second position. And then after that, it's depth battles galore. 3 of the offensive line positions we know are dead set. Left tackle, right guard. We presume thus far that Yilda Froholt has a hold on the starting center job, though Evan Brown is a wild card in that place. Left guard, wide open. Then so we're going to who's going to start out right at left guard? You've got maybe Evan Brown, who can play guard and center. You've got Elijah Wilkinson, 100% fully guaranteed contract this year. Tristan Colon. You've got the 3rd-round pick, Isaiah Adams, if you want to throw Dennis Daly into that mix as well. But you've got basically 4 guys that you've got. So the left guard position, super intriguing, just like it was last offseason. And even though we found a lot of intrigue in it last offseason, there wasn't that much intrigue. It was pretty much always going to be Elijah Wilkinson.
Yeah, so it looks like it's going to be Evan Brown with their eye on hopefully it being Isaiah Adams, right? That's what it seems like the goal is. And then you said it, if Isaiah, here's my question. If Isaiah Adams shows enough, then does it become Evan Brown versus Yelda Froholt? Or is this a situation where you're just no, we trust we trust the veterans. That's where we're going to go and kind of go from there. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, because I think their goal was, obviously to have as many of these guys from this rookie class starting as possible, but they're also not going to be stupid with it, right? They're not going to be
honestly, I don't think that they're banking on Adams this year. Just the way what they did, I think Adams is a treat in round 3 for them, that maybe, but the way they structured, the way they brought people in, is that they're perfectly prepared for
Evan Brown or somebody. So that'll be what's interesting, because I think you're right. I think it feels almost locked-ish, right, with Yelda and Brown.
Especially, you get Yelda in year 2. He's working with Kyler all the time. Notice you didn't see Evan Brown out of the Diamondbacks game with Kyler Murray.
Right.
You didn't see Evan Brown out in Mexico for the draft. That was Yelda Froholt. And so it feels like, and here's the thing. It happens with that. If Evan Brown doesn't end up starting at left guard, I think that might say something about John Gaines, that they might not have a spot on the roster for John Gaines. But the backup situation is super fun to look at, because you have guys with guaranteed money. And while that's not the end-all be-all, if you have guaranteed salaries, you're more or less going to have those guys on the roster. Elijah Wilkinson, barring a trade, will be on the roster because every penny of his contract in 2024 is guaranteed. Unless he's awful or he's injured, he will be on the roster whether he is starting at left guard or depth. And the one thing about Wilkinson that you do get as a backup, you get guard tackle versatility because he's played guard and he's played right tackle, which would then make it easy. I think Dennis Daly even now is more goodbye because he was your guard tackle backup. And that's the one thing if you're trying to project the depth, you always want a backup center guard, a swing tackle, and a guard who can play tackle as well. If I'm building an offensive line. And so you've got Kelvin Beachum, plays both tackle positions. You've got John Gaines, backup center. You've got Tristan Colon, guard center. And then you've got Elijah Wilkinson, who's guard tackle. And then if you're going to keep another guy, Isaiah Adams is going to make this roster. And then after that, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's really anything to argue with about that.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best our Cardinals talking about. Let's look at the defensive battles on the field. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best our Cardinals talking on the web. What are the position? What are the roster battles on the defensive side of the ball? Oh, defensive line is fun, isn't it?
Yeah, fun, intriguing. I was talking to some buddies about it the other day, and we were just going through the R-Lads depth charts. And, those aren't the Bible by any means, but they're a nice look at what things could be. And it was interesting because we're talking about it, and it's like the first six, you don't want to say that they're good because, we don't know that yet.
Fine.
But you feel like that first six.
That defensive line now feels like a position of relative strength.
Right. Like they're at least average, which is a huge, monumental upgrade from last year. And so,
they were signing guys off the street to play last year. That's how bad. But we know who's going to be on the roster. We know Darius Robinson is going to be there. We know Justin Jones is going to be there. Bilal Nichols is going to be there. So those three for certain. LJ Collier plays in. I'm not 100. I know they like LJ Collier, and I think that's kind of the plan. I'm not 100% sold that he'll make the roster. If Darius Robinson balls out, I think LJ is replaceable because Darius Robinson is a younger LJ Collier, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only way I could see them keeping Collier is obviously the depth is good, and so if Robinson's your starter and you feel like you have a veteran in Collier that can do similar things like you're saying at what he's listed at,
Dante Stills could be that guy.
Yeah, but I think they like the idea of having a 6-man rotation, and right now the question I have, would it be Kyrus Tonga or Roy Lopez as your next guy? Ben Stilley, Phil Hoskins.
Those are all,
Naquan Jones, maybe Miles Murphy. We talked about him, the undrafted free agent, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Right. Then we go to outside linebacker where it's more about the depth. It's more about the depth because B.J. Jolari and Zaven Collins will be the starters this year. And Dennis Gardeck will have a role for certain, but after that, the battles are the back end. So after those three, can Xavier Thomas make the team? Victor McKay, they liked him. Cam Thomas, Tyreek Smith, Jesse Laquetta, who kind of does everything. He's a stud special teamer. You can use him as a fullback. He's a guy that he's the type of player that every team loves to have. Team first, absolute, and can do a lot of different things. And so, what we're expecting if we're talking about guys that the Cardinals need to take a step forward in production, they need Ojulari and Collins to do that. They need them to be starting caliber pass rushers. Okay? But after that, it's crapshoot. That's where the battle is what are going to be the roles beyond them.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, like you said, Dimikaji, Gardeck. Gardeck, obviously, I think you've hit the nail on the head earlier with he's going to be there because he's, you know, a core special teamer. Dimikaji is interesting because I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that um, he is obviously, or Xavier Thomas is obviously similar to him. They're also similar ages, right?
They are. Yes, Dimikaji is 1 month older than Xavier Thomas.
So, you know, that'll be interesting to watch. But Dimikaji's not, you know, this regime's guy, and that doesn't mean anything, but it also means stuff sometimes. It feels like Cam Thomas is gone, right? Like
feels like it. Although
he's got like the biggest uphill battle in the world to make this roster.
Yes, which is really disappointing because like we both loved him coming out of college, but like those two edge guys that they drafted in the 3rd round 2 years ago, Myjai Sanders isn't even on a roster right now. And then Cam Thomas kind of fell off that. You know, we'll see what happens if he needs that year 2 jump that you need from your second year players. That was stunted because he was in a new defensive system, and then maybe Cam Thomas can build into that for this year. But like if you're keeping 5 outside linebackers, you've got 3 that are set. And then after that, you've got Dimikaji, Thomas, and Dimikaji, Thomas, Laketta, and other Thomas, Cam Thomas, all 4 of those guys battling for 2 spots. And then you've got Tyreek Smith in the mix as well, a guy that they liked and brought in off waivers.
Yeah, and so this is a really interesting group because after the top 3, because I would throw Gardeck in there. I'm not saying he's a lock in terms of being the 3rd.
But he did lead the team in sacks.
I know, man. I know.
He did lead the team in sacks. He is a core special team. He's a team captain, and so you know he's got some role on the team.
Right, and so he'll be on the team no matter what. It'll just be interesting where his role is. From there, you know, it'll just play out how it goes, and I really don't have a feel for it right now because we don't know exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Now, at inside linebacker, I don't feel that there's minor stuff, but I don't really think I think that position is basically set mostly in terms of roles and spots on the roster. Because Kaiser White and Mack Wilson, you're going to peg them to be the starters. Chris Barnes, who can be a spot starter, but he's the guy that you have behind those 2. You have Owen Papo, the young guy. And then you've got Marcus Bailey, a stud special teams guy that replaces Zeke Turner. And for me, like there's not a lot. Like last year you had Josh Woods, Chris Barnes batting for a starting job. I think the signing of Mack Wilson, if he's not starting, you're then like, Chris Barnes is doing really well, but then you question that signing because the money that they paid Wilson is that of a starting linebacker.
Yeah, and you look at it, you know, White, Barnes, Wilson, I think they love Owen Papo and Marcus Bailey, and that's 5, and that makes it really hard for guys like Trevor Nowaski and Tyreek Maddox-Williams to make this roster, right?
And let's be honest, what's a Trevor Nowaski?
Yeah, I just learned who that was. So.
Yes. Cornerback, super intriguing because, you know, Sean Murphy-Bunting's locked in. Garrett Williams feels like a lock-in, but they you know, between Garrett Williams and Keitrell Clark last year and then adding Max Melton and Elijah Jones, and I'm sorry, Jaden Davis, I have no, like, I always felt that, like, I talked about the draft, thought that was like, okay, sure, another cornerback. Like, he's not going to make the team. But that third cornerback and what roles the three quarterbacks are going to have. So is Garrett Williams moving into your top two and becoming flexible in terms of position, inside and outside?
Yeah, you would think so, right? But that's the thing. That's what they love about Max Melton too, is that he's done it quite a bit at Rutgers. So he's got that experience. Greg Schiano, defensive backs have done a really nice job coming from Rutgers. So it makes sense, and it feels like where they play isn't going to be as important as it feels like those three are going to be on the field.
You'd think so. And then you add in the wild card of Elijah Jones with his length and speed. But he should at least be, well, especially his length and speed, and my goodness, his on-ball production in college. And so you've got what you feel is a sleeper. Like, if there's a late round pick, like a day three, of their picks that has the potential to be perhaps the biggest steal, you might say Xavier Thomas. I'm not 100% sold on what we can expect from him as a pro based on his production in college. It's Elijah Jones, because he has the toolbox to be a starting boundary corner. And if you get that at the end of round 3, that's a home run. That's a home run, absolutely. And they've got him in they're in a position now where he doesn't have right now there's not even a spot for him in the starting lineup, because you got Murphy Bunting, you've got Garrett Williams that showed promise last year, and then you add to that Melton, you can expect at least that his athleticism will go on special teams, which that cornerback room now feels so much better in terms of depth, because Keitrell Clark, now not a lock for the roster. Star Thomas, definitely not a lock for the roster. Devod Wilson, all those rookies that they played last year. You really like how the competition, even if just the ability, the 1 year of Garrett Williams, and then bringing in Murphy Bunting, it solidifies things for me.
Right, and that's the hope, is that Melton hits, Garrett Williams is able to do what he did the back half of the season for 17 games, and Sean Murphy Bunting gives you that veteran steadiness that he's shown throughout his career. And if he's your 2-3 type of guy, which is puts huge expectations on Melton and Williams, but if Murphy Bunting by the end of the season is like your cornerback 3, that would be massive for this team.
That'd be
like
wild.
You said, right. Like, that would be massive, because that's 2 day 2 corners that you got that fit. And then, like you said, you have Elijah Jones in the pipeline. Man, that would be huge for this franchise that has not drafted a corner since Patrick Peterson. Byron Murphy was okay. I don't want to overstate what Byron Murphy didn't do. He was fine. He got a second contract for another team, but it's definitely been a long time and quite frustrating to be waiting to see what one of these guys can do.
And then at safety, the starters are set. We're going to see what we hope is Dadrian Taylor-Demerson battle Andre Sacheret off the roster. Not that I have anything against Sacheret. I root for players. But in terms of the guy that they drafted, that's who you want to win that job. And then it becomes rather a battle of Joey Blunt versus Sacheret for the special teams safety guy.
Yeah, and that's the goal, right? You get DTD on the roster, and then is it Sacheret? Is it Blunt? I guess we can throw Verone McKinley in there, but like it seems, does a guy like Keitrell Clark get looked at as some safety work, right?
That's an interesting move.
So, you keep him on the roster. So yeah, definitely some intriguing things that are going to be able to happen.
And, on special teams, I don't know how much of a battle this is. Aaron Brewer, Joe Shimko. I don't know. I'm not banking on any sort of competition there. Just, you always have a fourth specialist, a fourth specialist who is young, either a punter, kicker, or a long snapper. And this year it's a long snapper. Punter and kicker are set. And so Brewer is back without really any guaranteed money. And so Shimko's in the mix. But who knows?
Does our short king Joe Shimko make the roster?
And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, special Cardinals Talk. And we've talked about position battles. There's not much else to talk about in terms of what happens at OTAs unless we want to kind of go through what people are saying. But no show for another 2 weeks is how that will go this week. No show for 2 weeks, and then probably another no show for two weeks after that. So, listen to our older shows and just sit tight. We'll be back. Listen to this one again. And that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Rue. This is episode 543. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.